You are listening to the Let Me Overthink About It podcast, where I dive into a series of topics that occupy my anxious mind. I'm Sam Madore, overthinker extraordinaire. This week, I'm overthinking about pride and community with my pal, Kiley White. Kiley is a passionate advocate. She's currently working on her master's in counseling services, and she's the host of her very own podcast called Groovin. Here's our chat. I am here with Kiley White. Hey, Kiley.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well. How are you doing?
I am wonderful. I feel like I'm kind of like coming alive again post
Ooh,
January slump. So that's
I
good.
love it. We're recording this
Yeah.
early February, post crazy winter storm.
Yes, yes.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, it's been good. I always find January is so gloomy.
Yeah.
But this year I was super on top of it, and so I was going to the gym and really trying to
Oh,
not get super into that slump.
yeah.
Um, so there was only really a week this year that was pretty slumpy. But yeah, so it was
Man.
really just that one week, but it's so hard. It is so hard.
It is hard. And when you just said that about going to the gym, I was like, I was laughing at myself because this year I'm trying not to put too many restrictions on myself or too much pressure on myself, basically.
Yeah.
And when everybody was like signing up or getting memberships to gyms, I actually canceled mine. It was like January, I don't even know, 9th or something. And I was like, all I'm doing is feeling bad when I don't use it and
Yeah.
or going to one class a week or one class every 3 weeks and then really not getting my money's worth. So while everybody else was probably getting their memberships, I was like, screw it, I'm quitting.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah,
Hey, it's not for you right now. That's
no,
fine. That's okay.
exactly. I can always go back.
Yeah, you can go back later.
Right. So I love how we just didn't even we're just launching right into the conversation. So and I love all of my guests. I appreciate when they do want questions in advance, but I also appreciate when they're comfortable just having an organic conversation and seeing where it goes. So that is where
Yeah,
we are at.
I
And
love it.
you, Kiley, are a podcast host. So you're probably I feel like taking the driver's seat.
Oh my gosh, I know. I'm just
Do you?
hey, how are you?
Let's do a plug too, because I was part of your first season.
You
Was it
were
season 1 of the
season
Find Your
one.
Groove podcast?
Yeah.
So we can do a little shout out to that episode.
Ah,
And
yeah.
now you have a new podcast. So let's talk about that. So you had the one podcast with Brooke, and now you're doing your own thing called Groovin Podcast. Is that right?
Yeah, yes.
Tell us about it.
It has been a whirlwind, honestly, Sam. It has been a journey and a lot of self-discovery.
Yeah.
So when I started Find Your Groove, and I've definitely talked about this publicly, but when I started Find Your Groove, I was kind of in a really dark place, and
Mm,
partnered with my friend Brooke, and did some work just trying to navigate supports within the community that raised us, which was so cool.
yeah.
And then that show ended organically, it just,
Yeah.
we kind of interviewed most of the people we wanted to, and then just kind of decided to end it.
Once you were like, okay, we interviewed Sam Madore, what is the point of
We're
continuing?
we're done, no problem, we're over it. Yeah, so we but it was hard to end it when we did, because we still
Yeah.
had a waiting list, we still had people wanting to be on the show, but it just
Yeah.
it was time. So
So that happened organically. That's awesome. And it was really great conversations. And what I loved about it and of course we're both in Truro,
yeah, yeah,
is recognizing the faces of folks in our community who are doing really amazing things, particularly in relation to mental health and wellness, which is near and dear to both of
yeah,
us. So that
yeah,
was really cool for me to see some of those folks who I know deserve a mic and are doing great things.
yeah. And I loved every minute of that. Every minute of that show, felt it was very personal for me. And
Yeah.
and that was honestly part of the problem as
Mhm.
well, where it was my inner child was like embedded in the bones of that show. And like,
Yeah.
and that was definitely like not ideal, because like it just like every time I had a conversation, or every time, I just felt like it was such a massive part of my identity. And then, when the show had ended, I'm not even kidding you, Sam, like I went through it when the show ended. Like I was
Okay.
just like heartbroken, and just
Yeah.
like, like not really sure what to do next. Like I just felt so like weird, and like because so much of myself was in that show. And then I just sat down, and I built my own.
So what's the difference, Kylie? Like because obviously you said you were sort of ingrained in that and you were in a different place, in a darker place. So
Yeah.
what is the shift in this new podcast that is helping you?
Yeah. So Find Your Groove was very community based. So it was very much, the voices of Colchester County, where we're based. And it was that. And Groovin, it's really highlighting the voices of change makers all over the place.
Gotcha.
Well, also having that, component of myself and my own practices. So it also has, I don't know if I had mentioned this to you earlier, but I'm doing my master's right now in counseling.
Yes.
So a lot of, the elements and my passions of that practice is also embedded into this series. So it also is still has that wellness piece, and advocacy
Yeah.
piece, and all of the intertwined pieces together. And it's powerful, and I really am loving it so far. Yeah.
Awesome. Super
Yeah.
cool. And we'll put all the info in the show notes for anybody who wants to check it out because you just started. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah.
Again, this is early February. So by the time this is out, maybe it will be a few episodes deep, but
Yeah. Yeah. So it launched January 1st. 2024. It was like
awesome.
going into 2024 with like a bang. Like it's like, let's go.
I love it.
So launch then, and then yeah, and it is so when I launched it, and it took me a little bit to figure out like what it was.
Yeah.
And the only thing like I can really say right now, it is more than a podcast. And so there will be other things that are going to expand. I can't really say much
Amazing.
too much right now, but there is some
Oh,
projects in the works.
I love the teasers. I'm all about teasers in my episodes because then later
Yeah.
when it becomes a thing, we can say, remember on the Let Me Overthink About It podcast, we had
Remember
a
when we
teaser.
said
Yeah.
this? So it is more than that, but it took me a long time to figure out like what I was doing. I was like, was pouring my energy and pouring this kind of like healing process, um into this new show. And I was like, I don't know what this is. Like I feel weird. Like
Yeah.
I'm trying to like navigate it. And it is definitely more than conversations. So I'm really excited
Yeah.
to
I
share
love
more.
it. And how different was it for you? Because it's scary to do it on your own, I think, too. Like, and so you have a very clear difference. I don't have anything to compare it to, but like when you're putting it out on your own versus putting it out with a partner who's equally as invested as you. So you can be like, are we
Yeah.
doing this? What are we going to say? How's this going to look? Whatever.
Yeah.
How much does that kind of play on your brain? Or maybe it doesn't.
Yeah, like the one thing that I definitely did struggle with was relearning how to interview
Mm,
was something that was weird, because it was always kind of, me and one other person that was interviewing a guest. But besides that, honestly, I love the freedom of creative practice. Like I love,
mm,
being able to push my own ideas and expand
yep,
and do more and be more. And I love that piece, and I love, allowing my creativity to just float around. Like
yep.
um yeah,
Oh,
it's
cool.
it's kind of like also like nerve-wracking at the same time, because when you put stuff out there, you're like, I don't know if people are going to relate, or I don't know if people are going to get it. Um, but it feels very, very, just like, I don't know, just very creative and very, very cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, congrats. And I feel like, and so going back to when you said about your initial podcast, Find Your Groove, I feel like we have similar, not quite, but parallel stories in terms of like moving back home, for example.
Yeah.
So like we're both you're from Truro
Yes. Yeah.
originally. Yeah. And so I, of course, moved back home a lot earlier than you did. I'm a lot older than you, but we don't need to necessarily talk about that. Um, but moving back home and making that decision, and I know I've talked openly about this before, almost feeling like I took a step back and feeling like all of the feelings of coming back to a place that wasn't always kind to me. And so
Yeah.
having sort of the mental capacity to work through and around that, but then also coming out the other end, creating that sort of community or environment that you want to live in
Mm.
and you're happy with, or at least getting to be happy with. Um, do you want to speak to that? Am I putting words in your mouth, or can you relate to that
No,
story?
I no, I totally relate. Like when I moved back to Truro, like things were like a mess. And
Hmm.
I was actually like we had moved back in May and I was getting married in July.
Oh, so you're newly married.
I'm
20,
newly married, yeah.
when did you get married?
2022.
22. Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Congrats. Okay.
Thank you. So I like we got married 2 months later, so there was a lot of life changes that were
Yeah.
happening, moving home and like kind of refacing a lot of like buried trauma and buried hurt and buried, pain that was like kind of like I kind of was avoiding because
Yeah.
I did live away. So I honestly I had to go to therapy. I did. And um I was kind of reliving all of that, and then I was getting married and that was a big transition. And I'm still going to therapy and still learning how to navigate like some of those emotions when they do come up, because when I first moved home I was kind of facing a lot of it and being like, I don't know what to do with all of this anxiety that's in my body. I
Yeah.
can't go here, and I feel weird here, and I can't look at this sign because it makes me feel weird, like um and I did have to go and do get some support, like genuinely.
Mm.
And I got support, but then I also like was able to pour that energy into creating a podcast and moving forward with podcasting with a friend of mine. And that was a really beautiful process as well, and it definitely was a part of my healing process. As much as I like don't want to admit it, I'm like I did it on my own, but that's not the
Yeah.
case at all.
I mean, I would argue you're still doing it on your own. You're just doing it
Yeah.
in maybe a not traditional or a bit of an unconventional way.
Yeah.
But having those conversations and working through that is you are the one who started the podcast that ultimately led you through that experience,
Yeah.
which is great.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so now where are you feeling like you are in terms of, because I feel like you've created community around you and community is really important to you. This is just me as the sort of with a bird's eye view, but
Yeah.
how are you feeling in terms of where you're at now being home?
Well, yeah. So I had moved home, and, like I had said, I was really going through it. So during that time, I was actually having a hard time maintaining employment.
Mm,
Not even just like maintaining employment, but just like trying to navigate um just being back in my community and then re-immersing myself into my community. And
yeah,
was finding a hard time finding an employer at the time that like fit my needs and I fit their needs. So I jumped around for like a couple nonprofits when I first moved home, and then I landed a job at Trail Pride, and it changed everything for me. It
mm,
they I'm not even kidding you, Sam. Like I got in that job, we had an incredible, a new board and an incredible group of
yeah,
people, and they were just like, we trust you, go do what you do best.
that's a huge word.
Huge
Trust. Yeah.
trust. And me and my coworker Abby took that and we ran a marathon with it, and we're still running the marathon.
Yeah.
And it's we're just doing everything we can to like really best support queer and trans individuals like in rural spaces and what that looks like,
Yeah.
and collaborating with other community partners and nonprofits. And um it really allowed, you know, that creative energy that kind of lives within me, and that collaborative piece that is so
Mm,
powerful and something I'm really passionate about to kind of like come together. And True Pride, I give them credit because
that's awesome.
they just saw something in me, and they saw potential in me, and let me do what I needed to do, and it worked. So
Oh, that's so
yeah.
cool. And Truro Pride, I have to say, you guys are doing some great things and having some great conversations and putting community together, I think. I just
Yeah.
think about like the Truro Brewing Company
Oh,
and we'll just give
yeah.
a little shout out to them because they're awesome,
Yeah.
but and the community that they've created or that you guys have in partnership. Like there's just so much kind
Yeah.
of circulating around that business and Truro Pride. And
Yeah.
actually Tara Thorne was my first guest of this season and she did a shout out to you guys because you showed her film last year and just that sort of opened her eyes to what you guys were doing and
Yeah.
she was really complimentary of what you guys were doing too.
Yeah. And I'm definitely, there's still roadblocks, and there's still
Oh yeah.
things that we're trying to kind of push against, and we're kind of boundary pushers. So
I think you have to be.
no, like we do, definitely. And there's something else I really love about True Brew, and I don't know why they let me do this or anything, but I went in there with like a couple of ideas,
Mm.
and they were just like, yeah, they didn't even know me.
Okay. Awesome.
I was like
Yeah.
new to the role, and I was like, this is who I am. And I shook the owner's hand, Jana, and I was
Yep.
like, just so you know, like I'm gonna come to with you with some really cool ideas, and like we're gonna make some things happen. And she's like, okay, like who is this?
Love
Who
it.
is this girl that's showing up and being like knocking on the door and being like, this is what we need to do and it's gonna
Yeah.
work, I promise. And like this, you know, random person off the street, and I was like, this works, and this works, and this works. And then we just started that collaboration process with True Brew and Patrick, who's the manager there, and
Yeah. It's
just
awesome.
made things happen. And it's doing very well.
It's really cool. And I have to say, this episode is not sponsored by Truro Brewing Company. We are not being paid to say these nice things about them. They are just awesome community folks in
Yeah.
Truro. So that's amazing. I feel like, and I think about this a lot, and I probably anybody who's listened to my podcast for a while has probably heard me talk about this a lot, but fitting in is something that I have a lot of triggers around when I think about fitting in or being included or
Yeah.
listen, I'm a white uh, heterosexual woman. Like so fitting in should not be a challenge for me. But I just,
Yeah.
there are times, and I think, that does go back to when I was a kid growing up and being bullied
Yeah.
and feeling less than. And so when I think about particularly the LGBTQ community having this spot that they can go in Truro to feel like they fit in or belong,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
there's a difference between fitting in and belonging too, but I just think that's so great. And it's so nice to be able to, I'm sure from your perspective and from Truro Brewing Company, so great to be able to offer that for folks who might not feel like they belong.
Yeah. And you know, I just feel like when we put our brains together, and I've said this before, when we put our brains together and work to create space for people,
Mm-hmm.
you know, people respond to that.
Yeah.
And you know, I've been in the nonprofit sector for a while now, and you know, funding is always an issue. So True Pride at the time, like, can't necessarily receive funding for programming and for space and like some of that stuff.
Yeah.
But they have us. And so True Brew, even like allowing us to do events there and to have that partnership, and that you're not alone in this work and we're going to work
Mm-hmm.
together
Yeah.
is huge. It's huge for, you know, community growth and community engagement and community development. Like I think that, you know, when there's no need to not work together. There's no need to not
Yeah.
share. It's so powerful and so important when we do that.
Rather than like working against one another or feeling like we have
Yeah.
to be the owner of something, like, well, this was
Yes.
my idea, or this was, or I'm just
Yeah.
going to work in a silo over here, while, just being able to recognize that you can do so much more collaboratively than
Yeah.
you can on your own. I mean, that goes without saying, but sometimes I honestly, we see it all the time in the nonprofit
Oh, all the
world.
time, all the
Yeah.
time. And like this is literally my TED talk. Like I could talk about this for so long, Sam.
I'm just
I'm
going to
not
sit
even
back and
kidding
let you
you.
do it. I'm done. Here's
Because
Kylie.
it's we we are not meant as human beings, we are not meant to walk through this world alone. And I
Yeah.
will get that tattooed on my face. Like I will scream it from the rooftops because when isolation and loneliness is a very, very powerful thing.
Hmm.
And so is community. And when we gather and when we make music together and when we make art together and we have conversations together, it creates magic and it's a ripple effect that happens. And
Yeah.
so, me partnering with Churro Brew, all of this other stuff started kind of working. So right now at Churro Brew, there's something called the Trading Grove.
Oh, this is cool. Yeah.
Yes. So there's something called the Trading Grove that happens with that kind of lens of conversation and community and sharing. So the Trading Grove was actually something that I had saw in the woods at a music festival.
Really?
So I had seen this idea when I was at a music festival. I was there, I was dancing, I was living my life, and there was this little station in the middle of the woods called the Trading Grove, and people would leave things and take things. That's what it
Yeah.
was. People would leave clothing and jewelry and crystals and stickers and love letters in this space. And I went to this music festival right after I got hired from Trail Pride. And right before I left, I remember the day before, I already had my bags packed. I'm reading over the survey that Trail Pride had done in February of 2023.
Mm.
And the survey was highlighting loneliness and isolation and that
Mm.
lack of community and in community engagement. And then I went to this festival and I seen this space and the community that was creating as people were sharing and taking. And I brought the idea to Jana, who's the owner of
Yeah.
Churro Brew, literally a random person off the street. And she was like, okay, let's do it. Let's make it happen here. Because I really wanted to fill that gap and better support the queer and trans folks
Yeah.
now and more urgently. Because policy and structures, that's a whole other story.
That's a whole other podcast.
That's a whole other podcast. But I really wanted to be able to offer that ripple effect.
Yeah.
And yeah, yeah.
Is there a way, and maybe this isn't the point, or maybe it doesn't matter, but is there a way to gauge or measure how many people use that service? Like, and obviously you don't have to bring something to take something. Like I could walk in off the street
No,
and see
yeah,
something that I like and I could
you
take
can take
that.
it.
But is there, and again, maybe it doesn't matter, but is there a way to see the impact or see how many folks have are use that
Yeah.
service? Probably not.
I would love to be able to measure it. And I've had this conversation, just like in my work.
Yeah.
Um, I would love to be able to measure that because I see new stuff there all the time. And I
Right.
see old things gone.
Yeah.
And we're completely overloaded with stuff right now. So if folks locally are listening to this, please like utilize the Trading Grove and take things because a lot of people are coming and leaving things. And
Yeah.
I think like as a culture and as a society, we're not really used to that sharing, especially in Western ideology and for
Yeah.
white folks, like we're not used to that sharing piece. And it's okay, it's
Mhm.
okay to take, and it's okay to not have to pay for something. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I know it feels like, oh, well, It's that whole perception of like, I'm not in need, for example,
Right,
right? Or
yeah,
I don't want anybody to think that,
right,
I can't afford something or whatever that might look
yeah,
like. But ultimately, it's like that's what it's there for. And
yeah.
that's community.
And it is community, and the cool thing is about the trading grove is, like, if there's a funky scarf, like, take it, like,
Yeah.
there's some, like, really neat, like, niche things there, that are so like, books and art supplies, and it's more than I can't even explain it. It has a full energy on its own. Like, I
Yeah.
can't even. Yeah, yeah.
It's super cool. I love that idea. And again, it's just something new to try, right? And I think some
We're trying
people,
it. Yeah,
I love that you say you're like a stranger off the street coming in with ideas and they were willing to try because I mean, the reality is it could have completely flopped and they would have said, sorry, Kylie, like
yeah.
better luck next time or with your next idea or whatever. But it's nice to just be able to try those things and see what
I know.
works.
Yeah, and like like True Brew, like I go in there with ideas all the time, and they're like, "Yep, let's go, let's do it," and like
Yeah.
it just like feels very like just so community oriented in a way that I've never felt in my life. Like,
Yeah.
just yeah,
It's very, very cool. Very needed
so
for
cool.
sure. And you're an artist too, hey?
Yeah, yeah, I am. Yeah.
And when I say
Um,
artist, I mean like you paint. You are a,
yes,
yeah.
I'm an artist. So I haven't really done a lot of like public work. I would love to do a
Mm,
mural in Truro. That's my goal. I
that'd
would
be
love to do
awesome.
a mural. I think I kind of have one lined up. We'll see. But I want to do a mural in Truro that highlights our community is the goal.
Yeah,
Um, and I think it would just be so beautiful and powerful to have like a visualization of that ripple effect that I'm talking about.
totally.
Yeah, so yeah, I've been a painter for probably since my like second year of university. So it's
Awesome.
been a while now. But it's definitely um a wellness thing for me.
I was going to say, because the creative arts, obviously, a lot of folks lean on their creativity during struggles with mental health. I've talked about it a cajillion times on here, but
Yeah,
is that an outlet for you for your mental health and wellness?
yeah, definitely. I love getting messy.
Mm,
Like, I do. I actually have paint like
yeah.
on my overalls, like right now.
So
Um, I love the mess. I
yeah.
love having paint on my hands. I love like I genuinely do, and it's so powerful. And then recently, so I have perfectionism. That's another podcast for another day. I could talk about that
Yes.
forever.
Yeah.
Uh, so I was only painting for so long, and then I got a little bit into scrapbooking.
Oh,
When I was developing Groovin, I started to literally I was like sleeping and I was dreaming of these images and dreaming of these visuals that I really wanted to like make a part of the show.
yeah.
And so I printed off a bunch of pictures at work. Don't tell my boss. They're gonna listen to me like I knew we were running out of printer ink. Yeah, so I was like printing off pictures of like these visuals that I was having, and I wanted to paint them all, but I was like, that's no, like that's not gonna work. And I created, and I've talked about this on Groovin and I've shown this in several different media forms, but started creating this book of just what I wanted the show to be. And
Like a visual representation of
yeah,
what the podcast is, kind of
I
thing.
literally have it right here.
That's amazing. Oh my gosh, I love it.
And I just wanted a visual, like I just wanted to be able to have like just something that I can refer back to and, put all my ideas in one place. And, you know, then I kind of created this. And then my friend Kyle, shout out from Life's a Wreck podcast,
Yay.
uh, had called it a piece of art. And no one,
Absolutely.
I was like, oh,
Oh my gosh. Artists
Oh,
are the
okay.
worst. And I say this, no, and I'm not an artist in the same way that you are. My art is writing, but we're the worst in terms of that. Like
I was like, what?
it's like it just came naturally to me. It doesn't mean it's art. It doesn't mean it's worth
Yeah.
looking at. It's
I was
just
like,
for
what do you
me.
mean? Like, I don't know what you're talking about, but okay.
I love
Um,
it.
yeah, so I love that. I'm loving that right now, that exploration of different mediums. And
So
my
cool.
birthday is coming up in a couple days.
Hmm.
And every time I like age, I'm always like, what am I gonna do this year?
Okay.
So I think like my goal for like being 27
Hmm.
is to continue to explore different art mediums because I think it's very fun. So
Well, that's really cool. And I like that you have that visual. Like, I'm a visual person as well. So it's like
yeah,
you can actually refer back to that and just be like, oh, yeah, this is why I started this. This is like
yeah,
where the inspiration came from. And then also how it's shifted. You can compare like
yeah,
down the road
yeah,
to see how it's shifted in in a year or whatever.
yeah, yeah,
That's really cool. I really love that. So when you were talking about getting messy and liking getting messy, all I could think, because again, I don't paint. I do like a few DIY projects and things like that. So I understand that in concept, but it's the same for gardening. I'm not a gardener,
yes,
but
yeah,
same. It's like I
yeah,
want to get my hands dirty. I want my jeans to have dirt on them. I want
yeah,
like
yeah,
barefoot, the whole
yeah,
shebang. So
the
I
whole thing.
totally get that. It's like that rootedness.
It's very grounding.
Hmm.
And I'm like very I'm a very earth-centered person. And it's definitely going to be a big part of my own therapy practice once I'm done my
Yeah.
degree. But that getting messy piece is so just it's just so powerful for sure. Yeah.
It is. And it's funny how you forget that. Like, even just saying that about gardening, like I have plants that need to be repotted, just using this as an example. And I put it off and I put it off and I put it off. But even the act of actually doing something as simple as that would help me in moments when I am struggling with my mental
Yeah.
health. So it's just a matter of like reminding yourself of some of the things that help you in
Yeah.
those moments. And it's so
Yeah.
hard when you're in it to
Yeah.
remember all of the things or some of the things that might help you that are just super simple.
And I think the act of using our hands
Yep.
is I've seen this video lately on like Instagram and TikTok that was talking about the use of our hands and
Mm,
how that like tactile like energy is like so like it like just sends vibrations like throughout our whole body. And I definitely feel like art does that for me when I am making art
mm.
and when I am gardening and when I am kind of like um completely like enriched in like some of those hobbies that I have. Like it
Yeah,
does feel very, I don't know, it definitely feels like there's vibrations like moving through me. So
100%.
yeah.
Yeah, it is. That is a good point. It's actually using your hands. And I understand what you're saying for sure.
Yeah.
So when does school end for you? Like when will you have your master's and what's the end goal for
Wait,
you?
so I graduate in 10 months.
Oh my gosh, I didn't realize it was
Yeah.
that soon.
It's very
Awesome.
soon, which is amazing.
Yep.
I can't quite go into a lot of detail with like what's happening next.
Okay.
But there is a therapy practice that will happen.
Yep.
Which I'm excited about. Like it feels like I'm just like really excited to be like done school and to just kind of like continue and do
Yep.
what I need to do and move forward in my career. Like I just yeah, I'm really excited. I think there's going to be more elements of myself involved in that and
Mm-hmm.
more of that community engagement thing that I'm very passionate about, and more of those pieces are going to be quite like the forefront, but also being a part of my therapeutic practice. So, mhm.
That's so cool. And you get to create it. There's your blank canvas, right? It's like
Oh my
you
gosh.
get to create that.
Don't even get me started, Sam. Like, I am obsessed right now. Like, right now. Like, I'm obsessed. Like, I like just imagine me just with like paper everywhere, and I'm like cutting out pictures, and I'm just like, I'm ready. Yeah, I'm really excited. It's gonna be cool.
I
Yeah.
love it. And having that connection to your community already, assuming that
Yeah.
the practice will happen here locally or
Yeah.
whatever, wherever it is, you'll create the community. But especially now, if you've created this dynamic and this, connection to the community, and now you get to take that, what you've been learning and apply it, is just a really cool progression.
Yeah, and I didn't realize. Okay, so I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. You probably do. I didn't realize that people were listening to Find Your Groove for a while. And I knew that, but like I would run into people at Novelty, and people at Novelty would know who I was.
Yes.
And I would be like, hello, I've never met you in my life. Very nice to meet you. And I didn't like realize that kind of like ripple effect was happening. And then as Find Your Groove progressed, I was like, people were coming up to me like knowing who I was, or I would, go to meetings with work, and people would be like, oh, like I know you because of this. And
Yeah.
and it I feel like, from like a business perspective, that definitely is a good thing,
Hmm.
to be more known in the community. But I
Yeah.
definitely am excited to like bring more energy here. Like I definitely have plans. Yeah.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
And I know what you're saying. And it's always like, but you're not related to my sister or my
Yeah.
cousin or my friend or
Yeah.
whatever. You're like, wait, like you're off in New Brunswick or wherever, and I have
Yeah.
no connection to you. What is happening?
And then like people in Halifax are starting to get to know me,
Yeah.
just because I'm just through connections.
Yeah.
And then my friend Robin, who I interviewed a little while ago, that's going to be actually released next week.
Hmm.
Um, she was like, yeah, like people are starting to know you. Like I've, mentioned your name and people know who you are. And like, I'm like, okay.
It's so great. And that's the message. And it's also though, lots of people start podcasts and don't have that effect on folks. So you're doing something
Yeah.
great in your capacity to connect with people. And I think that that's just so important. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
one, maybe it's step one
Someone.
towards where you're going with your counseling and just, yeah, in the future.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty exciting. Yeah.
I always ask my guests this, and I with mixed reviews, mixed responses, but I always want to know, because I'm a quoteaholic, if you have a quote that you go to, if you are a quotey person, or if you're not, that's fine too. But if you have a quote that you go to when you're like, okay, maybe I need a pick me up, or I need motivation or inspiration.
So I do.
Oh, yay.
So I, again, when Find Your Groove ended, I was really sad.
Yeah.
And I seen this quote, and I have no idea where I seen it now. I can't even remember. But it says, you are the art and the artist.
I love that.
Thank you. And it's just, reminds me to trust myself.
I love that.
Yeah, like I'm moving through and doing all this stuff right now, and just really needing to trust my gut. Like I need to do
Yeah.
that more than anything right now. And just allowing my art to be mine, and to trust that I can do it, right? It's just
I really love. Do you know
yeah.
who said that? Who is attributed?
I
No
don't
clue. Yeah.
know. I don't know. And
It's unknown.
it's unknown.
That's a great way to end our conversation. Thank you so much, Kylie, for chatting. I really appreciated our talk
Thank
and
you.
coming on and doing a little tradesies.
Treaties.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Kiley White for overthinking with me today about pride and community, among many other things. Thank you all for listening. And once again, thank you to the Mental Health Foundation of Nova Scotia for supporting this podcast.